Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the increased foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail issue which seeks to liberalize entry of MNCs into the retail sector. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. Manoj Pant, Professor of International Studies in JNU, and Biswajit Nag, who is Associate Professor in the Institute of Foreign Trade. Now for the headlines. Foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail will enable brands like Walmart, Tesco and Carrefour to operate stores in India. Policy change is expected to bring in much-needed investment in the back-end integration of the food supply chain. Government needs to address concerns around the impact of it on farmers and the small shop owners. Increased foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail will enable multinational companies like Walmart, Tesco and Carrefour to operate stores in India. The policy change is also expected to bring in much-needed investment in the back-end integration of the food supply chain.
The news of increase in foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail set off a series of protests all across India, especially from trading community who feel threatened. According to the traders and small shop owners, if the MNCs are allowed to set up multi-brand retail shops, it will be at the cost of the traders and retailers.
The first thing is that competition will increase. The second thing that will happen is that a fair amount of back-end development will happen. The third is that it will force more and more people to manufacture goods up to a particular standard and quality. And fifth, it will also help in the grocery chain and help the farmers.
Foreign direct investment in multi-brand retail has been allowed up to 51% through the government approval route. The policy mandates a minimum investment of over 50 crore rupees, with at least half the amount to be invested in back-end infrastructure like cold chains, refrigeration, transportation, packing, sorting and processing. The policy also increases FDI in single-brand retail units to 100% from earlier 51% cap.
If by way of government regulations on multi-retail branding and retailing, foreign companies like Walmart etc. come in, that Pantaloons etc. will also put in additional capital, improve their processes and scale up and also get the same benefits of large scale as the other big companies have.
While scrutinizing the issue, the Standing Committee had raised questions that the FDI policy would displace a large number of jobs and global retail giants may adopt predatory pricing tactics. The committee had also recommended a model central law to impose strict regulations on big malls and their adherence to labor and environmental laws.
The enhanced FDI in multi-brand retail makes it compulsory for the foreign investor to spend on the back-end infrastructure, but leaves out the specifics. If the policy is implemented, it will lead to the strengthening of cold chain, refrigeration, transportation, packing, storing and processing. Aruna Thakur, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
FDI will help bring in the much-needed investment in back-end infrastructure, strengthening the supply chain. But what about the Kirana stores? So the question is, the most important, predatory trade practices. How big is your concern?
Okay, not that much, I'll tell you why. But you see, you should separate the issue. One issue is organization of the retail sector, and the next is FDI in the retail sector. Let's look at the first. What is the
We'll talk about the organization of the retail sector in the last segment, sir.
No.
We've got it all lined up. What we'll do is we'll try and understand the second point from you first.
No, but the second point, as I said, related to the first point. Let me come back to what I'm saying. See, what happens is the loss of jobs for the Kirana store can only come because the sector is moving from unorganized to organized. Now, that is not going to happen in India because in India, the movement of retail from unorganized to organized sector in the rest of the world happens because of change in labor costs. It becomes too expensive to have 10 people running small stores, so it's better to bring them under one roof. Now, that labor factor is not there in India. Labor cost is still low. So, I don't understand how organizing traders or organizing retail in one area will be more economical compared to having smaller kirana stores. So, I don't see that happening for that reason. Now, coming to the second part, FDI. Now, let me just go a little beyond what you said. This business about FDI will bring in a lot of money into back-end stores, back-end operations. Now, I have a problem with that. One, already our Indian retail sector has seen large organized sector already there. Why hasn't it taken place? Now, the foreign investment doesn't come in for back-end operations. Foreign investment comes in because they are going to make some money in normal retail. And they will do exactly what the Indian organized sector is doing at the moment. Now, unless the market size expands, I don't see why they would first start with, setting up warehouses. Unless there's enough to sell, why would they create warehouses? So, the question I'm saying is the following, that the opposition to FDI retail is coming for the wrong reasons. The problem is not the kirana stores. That makes no sense. To me, the main thing which FDI represents is competition, because there are very few big businesses in India which can actually afford organized retail, because only in urban areas. And they will not have any competition from the Indian sector. I think the competition effect is more important than money coming into back-end sector. That would happen as the sector expands, got nothing to do with FDI or not FDI.
But the policy change clearly, Biswajit, states that, and the government has been defending the entire policy change on the ground, that we really need to bring in investment into the back-end infrastructure. And that's the biggest defense, and that it will also benefit the farmer, get a better price. Now, that is the biggest defense of the government at this point of time. But monitoring back-end investment, impossible. How big a challenge is that?
In this context, I'd like to focus one thing, that there are already 100% FDI in cash and carry business. So, you also expected there are a lot of back-end investments, and there are efficiency and productivity in terms of improving the supply chain. So, at this moment, we do not have very specific research and reports, and that actually whether it has increased in last few years or not. And perhaps that confusion is actually raising the main doubt, that whether the back-end investment will be at all possible or monitoring, and as Professor Pant already mentioned, that they have coming here to make some money. Why they will go into that kind of things when it is not required? They might find out some other way to improve the efficiency in terms of the front end.
I get the point. Professor Pant, the point I want to ask you is it all right to let foreign MNCs or big banners like Walmart and Tesco to come into the Indian market just to make money?
Why not? They're already there. I mean, let me ask you, I don't want to take names of, tell me, is it okay for, let's say, an Indian businessman to cheat you, but it's bad for a foreign businessman to cheat you? I think both are cheats. Now, it takes one thief to catch another thief. So, if you think that, I don't see why do you assume that the Indian organized sector, the ones who are running it already, are very honest. But the outside one is going to be naturally dishonest. Now, this is the political part of it. You have already opened the organized sector to multi-brand retail for the domestic industry. Now, tell me which small Indian businessman can do this. It is only these 4 or 5 big houses who are doing it. Now, my question is, if you opened it to the organized sector, I think it's unfortunate that you don't want to open to the foreign businessmen, because they are the only competition. So, competition should be the issue, not the issue of whether more warehouses will come or less warehouses will come. I mean, that's to me the issue.
It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the impact of this policy change on the small shop owners and the farmers. Welcome back. The uproar in Parliament forced the government to shelve the increase in FDI and multi-brand retail proposal temporarily. The objections to the policy change made by political parties include concerns around the impact of it on farmers and small shop owners.
The government is facing a tough time reining in inflation. According to the government, one of the reasons for this is the hoarding tendency of a largely unorganized trading community. In order to check this, a lot of investment is required for infrastructure development to integrate the food producer and farmer. But the existing Indian companies don't have the wherewithal to take on such a huge challenge. So the government has little choice but to bring in foreign investments to speed up development in this sector.
Smaller the player you are, the more nimble you are, the more flexible you are, and the more willing to adapt you are. The larger players will always find it more difficult to adapt themselves to changes. That is why I feel that with this policy of the government, it is not so much that the smaller retailers will face the heat. It is our big retail companies like Pantaloons and Reliance. Perhaps they are more worried than the street hawkers outside.
According to the proposed policy, the giant stores will be allowed in cities with a population of 10 lakh and above. The policy also makes it mandatory for foreign companies to source minimum 30% from Indian micro and small industries having capital investment of not more than 5 crore rupees.
There will always be job creation. What happens is when you're a farmer, you don't look at return on investment. When you have your own store and you've got real estate tied up, you don't look at return on investment, and therefore you are able to price things in a cheaper way. And companies that come in have to really look at return on investment, and so expensive real estate will prevent them from being really that competitive. And what will make them competitive is their ability to help Indian companies to manufacture goods at a more competitive price, and that's what we hope that the FDI people will be able to do.
The Ministry of Commerce and Industry is the nodal agency for monitoring and reviewing the FDI policy. As of now, FDI is permitted in wholesale, cash and carry, and foreign players are present in the Indian retail sector through single brand stores. Once the new policy is implemented, it is expected to change the investment scenario in the country. Aruna Thakur, Rajya Sabha TV.
The government is clear. The FDI policy may have been shelved temporarily, but sooner or later, the FDI policy will be implemented. Yes, Biswajit, the point to you is organization of retail sector. We made it out clear in our story that it's all linked. Inflation is a continuous problem for the government. And back-end integration and investment in that sector is very important for the government, because according to the government, one of the factors is that once they improve the supply chain, then food will be comparatively cheaper. Now, the Indian companies who are already existing don't have the wherewithal to make that huge investment. What does the government do? The existing traders that we have are largely disorganized. There's also a revenue angle to it, where the government is not getting the kind of revenue that it should. So why not try and kill all these issues with one stone, the FDI increase?
Yeah, organization of retail is definitely a very important issue, and all the points you have mentioned, it is necessary for organizing this particular aspect. Now the issue is coming, the Indian big retailer versus foreign big retailer. Which organizations you are actually talking about? Already we are in a process for organizing the retails. Single brand, MNCs are actually present. Cash and carry is present. Indian big retailers are present. So this is a sequence, and definitely sooner or later the multi-brand retail will be present. So, and this is basically going to help regarding these 3 points you have mentioned. One is about price, second is about investment, third is about revenue. Now let me just go one by one. Regarding the price, now there are different aspects. The conditionalities are very important. Now when the big multinationals are coming, the structure is not purely competitive, rather it is a oligopolistic structure. There are very
Can you prevent against predatory practices as far as the price is concerned? Can you do that?
See,
can you ensure against it or bring in a clause? Professor Pant.
No. First, let's see, again, there's this confusion. You know, I think the government has confused everyone else. You know, issue is not the back end. Issue is the front end. The back end takes care of itself if the front end is taken care of. Now, the question is, first of all, I'll ask the question, why does the sector become organized? Right? We've already discussed about why Kirana will not lose their jobs. A sector becomes organized, I'll tell you why. Whether you talk about agricultural goods or other commodities, as you urbanize, the production centers, whether agriculture or non-agriculture, move further and further away from the urban areas. So it becomes more and more expensive for small traders to bring, you know, these goods on their bicycles, etc., to the city. At some point in time, economics of transportation become important. A sector becomes organized because it is worthwhile to buy a truck and bring things to the city. So this price factor is linked to the economics of transportation, which is why in big metros, you will see organized sectors, but you will not see organized sectors in small places because the economics is not worthwhile. It's cheaper to have a guy coming on a cycle and
delivering the stuff.
So the price factor, now as far as agriculture goes, that's a sensitive issue. Predatory pricing in agriculture, right? Now the problem is, it can't get more predatory. Today the farmer in any case gets nothing. So also if the government is going to pretend that the intermediary between the farmer and the retail and the organized sector is not going to be hurt, they're making a mistake. Of course he's going to be hurt. The margin for the organized retailer comes because he takes up the margin which is now going to these many intermediaries from these producing centers to the consuming centers. Those will, however, not lose jobs, but probably get hired in the organized sector, which also has to have someone working, right? So that's all. Now, where predatory pricing is going to come, I don't know. That's where
in the long term, is there a possibility?
I'd like to add from this particular point. See, the big retailers also requires agents and traders, distributors and kind of things. So the thing is, the nature of business will change. So the middlemen, the traders who are basically procuring from the farmers and selling it to some higher
will now become distributors of these big shops.
Could become.
Okay, could become. Is there a genuine change? Because if that is the change that could happen, then see, today largely there is a close link of between politics and traders in today's world. Is that a big concern? Because the traders are a very important chain of our democracy and the political process.
If I can make a quick point. See, there's this tendency, I think, more among economists, certainly among politicians, to assume that you can separate politics and economics. Study of economics is always study of political economy. It never was. You cannot separate. Now, what happens is, as any society goes through a development change, there are always structural changes. I'll give you an example. You had the washerman, the dhobi somni. Where is he gone? How many politicians have gone to parliament and shouted that don't have washing machines because dhobis are losing the job? They don't. Frankly, this happens over time. And the same thing is going to happen in organized retail. Now, if you said, let us not open the retail sector to organized sector at all, I would say fine. But if you open it up to the organized sector, you've already set in motion a certain change in the structure of the industry. Then I don't see what's the problem opposing FDI and retail, because all they will do is they will compete. Now, if competition is always the best method in any sector, and by and large the issues of FDI is the same in every other sector. The retail is being made largely a big thing, but it's the same problem everywhere. The issue is competition.
So according to you, it's a natural process of evolution.
Absolutely.
And we can't avoid it.
Why should you protect your big sector? Are they less predatory?
Right. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you what Praveen Khandelwal, Secretary General, Confederation of All India Traders, has to say on this policy change. Welcome back. My colleague Aruna Thakur spoke to Praveen Khandelwal, Secretary General, Confederation of All India Traders, and tried to find out the traders' side of the story.
Do you support the government decision to allow FDI in multi-brand retail?
Well, the multinational companies which have been allowed to operate their business activities in retail sector will come to India with predatory pricing policy with a clear-cut view to wipe out the competition. And once they are able to wipe out the competition, they will enter into crony capitalism that will see the higher prices to the consumer, and naturally the small retailers will have no option but to shut down their shops because they are quite incapable to give a tough competition to these multinational companies.
How do you see the new FDI policy from the small retailers' point of view?
Well, it is totally impossible to monitor whether they have actually spent money on backend or not, because the policy spells out that which is not front end is backend. But I mean, if we go to interpretation of this policy or this statement, it means that even the offices, their own offices, maybe in Noida, maybe in New Delhi, will be called as backend. So therefore, it is totally impossible to monitor.
The Trade Association wants that the government should create a trade council, and the council should be responsible for policy making. The first question to you, Professor Pant. Predatory pricing, not now, not in the near future. Once you let them in, 5 years or let's say 10 years down the line, is there a remote possibility of the big MNCs actually having a sort of a monopolistic tendency and controlling price? Is that a concern or not?
Yes, it is a concern, but let me explain to the gentleman who spoke why this is not such a big thing today as it was 10 years back. You see, as of 2010, I'll give you an example, you have the Competition Commission of India has been notified. And I will give you where exactly the Competition Commission actually acts very quickly for the predatory pricing. Take the case of stock exchange. There was the National Stock Exchange, and there were the Bombay Stock Exchange, and there is the CMX Commodity Exchange. Now, NSE did exactly this. They had dropped their prices of transactions to zero. Idea being to eliminate the competition from BSE and CMX and raise it again. What did the Competition Commission said? They said this is precisely the problem. You're a monopolist. In the competition laws, if you're a monopolist and you drop your prices, it is always considered predatory. And they were forced to bring their prices back to normal. So predatory pricing has got a regulatory authority today, the Competition Commission of India, where even I can go to them.
Do you think the competence is enough and they can actually, they have the wherewithal to?
Well, I'll give you so many examples. DLF land case, where the consumer, I give you many examples.
I get the point. It's doable. That is what you say. And
absolutely.
That's
the purpose of those who are opposing FDI and retail, to set up your watchdogs. You can file, doesn't cost very much to file an appeal against the, so a small trader does have very good recourse, and they've used it. Remember, it's only a year since the CCI has been notified. I can already think about 6 cases where they've acted on predatory pricing.
Biswajit, the point you were making about a week, there's no mention of a regulatory mechanism. How big a concern is that?
Yeah, this should be a concern because in many services sector in India, we have found there is a problem of standards, there is a problem of absence of clear policies in terms of what will be the price, what will be the conditions and kind of things. I think the same concern will be here also. Also, regulation is very important from 2 most important conditions attached to this particular policy. One is back-end and 30% procurement from SMEs. Now, as already we have heard that this is almost impossible to monitor. The reason also, there is an economic reason also it is why it is difficult, because these big players, their business model is to exploit the economies of scale. So there is a tendency to go to a big suppliers rather than a small supplier, because there they can reduce many of the transaction cost in terms of. The question here is how the big players is passing the risk and how the risk is being absorbed. There is a price risk, because when I am procuring, there is no condition that I will be procuring from you again next year. Okay. Then also the down the line from the contractor to in contract farming also, in many cases this contract is not well written or well regulated also. Similarly, the contract between the supplier and the buyer, the front end is also many cases is a matter of convenience. So those kind of things need to be monitored,
regulated,
so that actually those 30% and 50%.
And what according to you should be a sort of a mechanism to what kind of a body? So is the Competition Commission sufficient, or you need to have some alternative
Competition Commission is basically looking at all sectors.
I get it.
Okay.
But is there
so
a
you
similar
require a sectoral also?
Sectoral regulatory mechanism.
So just like on telecom regulatory.
The point, Professor Pant, on the 30% procurement from micro and small industry, and there is a capping that they should not have 5 crores worth of capital locked into their business. Is this doable?
No. How are you going to monitor? How are you going to monitor has he bought from small manufacturer? If I am a large manufacturer and I route my sales through the small manufacturer, who's made it? You know, again, as I said, trying to go behind is foolish. Look at the front end. The back end looks after itself. Frankly, even the other one that at least, 30% something they must spend
50% on back end.
On the infrastructure.
Yes,
How will
yes,
they calculate
back-end
that? How will they calculate that? Which industry or firm in the
RBI.
world? Which firm in the world is going to say, I'm going to set up a warehouse and then start operations?
No. You think all this has been inserted into the policy to ensure that the people don't, it's basically to make people comfortable?
No, I think one is that, and also I think it's been done to ensure that there will be no FDI in retail.
Okay. On that, thank you, sir, for joining us on this discussion. It is time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We will be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.